Okay, good morning, everyone. I just want to welcome everybody to the meeting. I had myself on mute, so for those of you who have been bearing with me for the past 2 minutes, you've not heard a thing I've said. Anyway, my name is Gail Henriksen. I'm the Community Development Director for Clatsop County, and we will be holding our initial short-term rental meeting for the Clatsop Plains area. We have been conducting these meetings throughout the different parts of the county to begin a dialogue between residents and owners of short-term rental properties to help identify some of the issues and concerns that our residents are having, to talk about some of the ways that the short-term rental owners have been looking to make changes to the way they operate their businesses, and also for staff to be able to explain how the code compliance process works and how we process a complaint once it comes in. And our intent is to hold these meetings on a quarterly basis. And so this being our first one, I would expect to see another one probably in the January timeframe. Before we get started this morning, I do want to first of all go over the GoToMeeting webinar platform so that we're familiar with it. When you bring this up in your computer browser, you'll see that there's a pop-up dialog box that should be probably in the right-hand corner of your monitor. It has on it a little red box with an arrow in it. You can click that to hide and unhide the dialog box. We have two handouts here today, so you'll see that we have a copy of the presentation that we'll be going through this morning, and also a copy of the short-term rental ordinance, the most recent amended one, which is Ordinance 1904. If you have questions, there is a chat box where you can type in a message, and I'll be monitoring those. There's also another dialog box that's called questions, and you can also type in your questions there. If you click on the attendee box, you'll be able to see everyone who's attending the meeting here today. And over here on the very far left-hand side, you'll see the red muted microphone. Red means that you're muted, and everybody is muted right now. When we get to the point where we're taking public comment, I'll unmute the speaker, but you also need to make sure on your end that your microphone is green and ready to go. Going back just for a moment to the attendee list, if you look at the attendee list and you see your name, you'll see that there's a little hand that's up in the air. If you have a question as well, you can click that box, and I'll be monitoring that and calling on people as well as we move forward. Okay, so as I said, this is our initial kickoff meeting for the short-term rentals for Clatsop Plains. We've held a meeting so far in the Falcon Cove Beach planning area and the Arch Cape planning area down in southwest portion of the county. Clatsop Plains is another area where we see more short-term rental units than we do in other parts of the county. So we're really primarily focusing our efforts in those areas that do have the short-term rentals. Okay, so since October of 2019, we've had 136 complaints regarding short-term rental units throughout the entire county. When we get to more specifics for this planning area, we've had 5 complaints specifically within the Clatsop Plains area. But of the 136 that we've received overall countywide in the past year, we have closed 45 of them. We have 19 that are currently awaiting review and 60 that are under review. And then we have 12 that have recently come in where we have received a complaint. When we talk about code compliance, we're really talking about a process that's a little bit slow moving. And I know that's sometimes frustrating for people because, you know, their concerns are immediate, or the problems that are being caused are immediate and impacting them on an immediate basis. Unfortunately, what we see is a lot of times complaints will come in on weekends or holidays or in the evenings when code compliance staff is not available or in the office. And also, code compliance is not meant to be a penalization process. It's really meant to help properties and property owners come into compliance with the ordinances rather than a way for the county to collect fines and penalties. So when we talk about code compliance, we also have a prioritization and a way that we rank our complaints and how we respond to them. So the category 1, the top tier of complaints, are those that are health and safety issues, places where we may have hazardous waste, people dumping sewage into streams and rivers, where we have burning issues and fire issues, or again, impacts to surface water. Moving down from there, we've got category 2 and 3 complaints, which vary from issues with holding tanks for septics, people building things without permits, and then category 4 are the very low priority things. Places where we have maybe accumulation of solid waste, where we have people occupying RVs or squatting on property. These are generally land use violations and not tied to any type of health or safety issue. So a lot of what we get complaints about, just to give you an idea of code enforcement, our 2 code compliance specialists, they deal with things such as auto wrecking yards, where people are storing old inoperable vehicles on their property, collecting parts in hopes of someday restoring a vehicle, in some cases making use of your vehicle as a dumpster. We do have a lot of unpermitted development where people are constructing buildings, whether it's an outbuilding or a house or a garage or anything like that, a lot of times without permits. We have a lot of cases of unsafe structures, and as you can see, about the only thing holding this building up here are the 2 pieces of lumber that are basically propping the building up. We do see a lot of RV and tent occupation throughout the county as well, and even though that there are provisions for limited occupancy for a very short term, what we see is oftentimes these type of living arrangements don't have septic facilities or water facilities, and that creates, especially in the time when we're in a pandemic, it just increases health and safety issues. And then this is another problem that we see quite a bit around the county, is where people have just accumulated things on their property for a number of years. A lot of it's just garbage. Sometimes it's things that people have accumulated for future projects or maybe for scrap that they're looking to sell at one point. But this is definitely a big problem that we see elsewhere in the county. And this is probably the one of our main concerns, is that we do have a lot of places where septic tanks and septic systems are failing. You'll see raw sewage bubbling up out of the ground. In some cases, people are making their own improvisational piping systems and plumbing systems, digging their own trenches for waste. And then sometimes, as I mentioned, you'll see a lot where people are living in RVs or tents that there's just no septic available. So people are basically using buckets as their bathrooms, and then either just dumping them into creeks or rivers or dumping them on the ground. Occasionally they will take it to an approved disposal site, but that's usually not the case. So we deal with a wide variety of issues with code compliance. So again, I know it's frustrating sometimes when you don't feel that your complaint is being heard or responded to, but also just to give you a little bit of perspective of what we handle daily within our office. So to talk briefly just about the ordinance, our short-term rental ordinance for the unincorporated area outside of Arch Cape was adopted in January of 2018. And the reason that we adopted that ordinance was to be able to address some of the life safety issues that go with tourist accommodations. Prior to that time, short-term rentals were not licensed, they were not inspected, so there was no way to verify if basic safety issues were being addressed, things such as fire extinguishers or escape routes, or being able to use a window as an egress in case of a fire. So that was the primary concern. When we drafted the ordinance, we also included regulations regarding occupancy rates, how notice is provided to neighbors, and how parking and solid waste issues are addressed. So, for example, with regard to notice to the neighbors, it started out that the property owner would mail out a notice to property owners within 100 feet. Following that, we've amended the ordinance now so that the owner pays a fee to the county, county staff mails out the notices, and we've increased that notification distance from 100 feet to 300 feet. All of the parking is required to be on site, so there's no on-street parking allowed for a short-term rental. And your solid waste is supposed to be gathered and put into a container that is securely fastened, so you don't have lots of trash and things blowing around the neighborhood, especially during our windy winter weather. So looking at the standards themselves, we do have some regulations. They're not always followed, but countywide there is a quiet time of 10 p.m. to 7 a.m. and that it applies to all properties within unincorporated Clatsop County. When you do have a complaint, should you have one, you should be contacting the agent for the property owner, and every short-term rental is required to have a listed agent that can be contacted when there is a complaint or something happening on the property. And so that contact person is supposed to be responding within 20 minutes of receiving the complaint. What we're finding is that that is not the case, and that's part of the issue that we're having, is that a lot of times the contact person is not available or isn't responsive. And then what happens is that the person making the complaint, who either is not comfortable reaching out to the contact person or the contact person isn't responding, then calls code compliance. And you can call code compliance day or night, but if you do call us after 4 p.m. on a weekday, if you do call us on a weekend or on a holiday, you will not get a live person. And I'm going to talk in a few minutes about how we're going to address that, but just be aware of that. So if you call on a Friday night with a noise complaint at 11 p.m. and we get that message on Monday morning at 7:30 a.m., chances are the noise has solved itself and the noise is not an ongoing concern. So you have filed a complaint. Code compliance staff takes the complaint. We will make a drive-by by the property where the noise occurred, see if it's still going on. If it's not, we log the complaint, we mark the site visit, and then we mark the case closed. And so, again, a lot of people find that frustrating because they feel as if, you know, people get to make noise. We don't have a code compliance person out there right on at the moment that the complaint's happening. And then there's, you know, this feeling of frustration that nothing is being done or we're just kind of ignoring the problem. I will tell you that after hours, if you do have noise complaints, after that 10 p.m. to 7 a.m. Window of quiet time, you can call the sheriff's office. I would not call their non-emergency number and let them know. And the sheriff's office has agreed that they will come out and respond to those types of noise complaints as well. Okay, so we talked a lot about this. When we do get a complaint and we do find that the violation is still ongoing, we have a couple of different options available to us. We can issue a notice of warning, which basically goes to the property owner and states, we've received a complaint, here's what you're in violation of, please note it. And we would typically do that if it's maybe like a parking complaint where it's not a health safety issue. You know, obviously the car has been moved by the time staff has gotten down to investigate the complaint, but we do want to make sure the property owners are aware of what's happening on their properties. We can issue a notice of infraction, which is the next step up in the process, and that basically leads to a more binding code compliance order, which eventually can become a lien on the property. So again, it's a lot of the complaints that we're receiving are things that self-correct themselves before staff can get out there. So we don't usually hit that infraction level on a regular basis. It's usually just the letter of warning. We have other options available to us as well. We can attach additions to the short-term rental permit. If it's a health safety violation, then we can schedule and require them to go through another inspection with building codes. We can also temporarily suspend the permit until they've addressed the issues. And in really egregious cases, we can actually revoke the permit. To date, we have not revoked a permit. We have had to threaten people with revoking permits, and that usually has brought them into compliance. So I want to spend some time getting to our public comments. So I'm going to skip over these next couple of slides, which basically just talks about the review process. So moving on specifically to the Clatsop Plains area, there are 39 short-term rentals that have been licensed within the Clatsop Plains planning area. You can see on this map, the pinkish purple dots are the locations of those different short-term rental units. A lot of them are concentrated up in the Sunset Beach area. So again, since October of last year, out of the 136 complaints that staff has received about short-term rentals countywide, 5 of them were concentrated in the Clatsop Plains area. 4 of them were for operating a short-term rental without a permit, and 1 of them was a noise complaint. So, and of that, of those 5 complaints, I think that there are 2 that are in the permitting process yet. The other ones have obtained permits, and the noise complaint self-resolved itself. Okay, so I talked a few minutes ago about what happens when you call code compliance after hours, and you will get a recording and you'll leave a message, and by the time we get to your message, your complaint probably will have been resolved. But in order to assist staff with this process and make us more responsive to the residents living in the area and people who do have concerns, we have contracted with Lodging Revs, and they are a code compliance software company that specializes in software and monitoring of complaints, specifically with regard to short-term rental units. So we have signed the contract with them. We have been working through the go live process, and we are expecting a go live date that will occur probably just before Thanksgiving next month. So we're looking at probably about 3 more weeks before we go live with that. The phone number, if you want to jot that down, is 503-325-1001. We will be sending some press releases and information out to people to kind of promote this new software program. There will also be a web link and information on the county's website so that you'll be able to go there, find the phone number, find the link directly to their online software where you can lodge a complaint online. And what will happen is Lodging Revs then will log all of your calls. They will be the ones who will contact the listed contact person for that short-term rental, and then they will work through that compliance process. And this is especially important when we have calls coming in after hours, weekends, and holidays. So that will just be another option that'll be open to all of our residents and owners to be able to utilize that to make their complaints. Okay, so we're now at the public comment portion. And this is where you're going to have to be patient with me, because I'm going to have to try and read and answer and monitor everybody's questions, because I am the only one here today. So we did have a couple of people who had pre-registered, so let me call their names out first. Let's see here. So we had Robert Taylor. Let's see if he's here. Okay, Mr. Taylor, you're unmuted if you'd like to go ahead and provide your comment. Mr. Taylor, we cannot hear you if you're speaking. Okay. Well, we will come back to Mr. Taylor. I also had Carla Jackson. Let's see, Carla, you are unmuted, so on my end, so you'll need to unmute yourself if you'd like to speak. Okay, go ahead, Carla. Okay. So I'm not hearing Carla either. All right. So I'm not sure what's happening with our audio. So in the meantime, I've got a couple of questions here. One is from Scott Roos. It says, what if parking is not allowed on the street within a neighborhood like Surf Pines? So no, for our short-term rentals, none of the rental users should be parking on the street, regardless of whether or not you allow parking within your neighborhood. If the streets are signed no parking, then you do have the ability to call the sheriff's office and they can come out and ticket the violator. But if it is a public right of way and it is not signed with a no parking sign, then people do have the right to park on that right of way. Okay. And then let's see. Janet Hop has asked, where can I get a list of those properties permitted for short-term rentals? So we have not made a public list. Assessment and Taxation does have concerns about advertising houses that might be vacant and making them a target potentially for criminal activity. If you do, Janet, you can go through our public information officer and do a public records request for that information, and then we would provide that to you. But it's not something that we publish just for the entire public to see. And that, again, that's from safety concerns from Assessment and Taxation. Okay. All right. So Robert Taylor has indicated he would like to try to speak again. 1 second. Okay, Robert, if you take yourself off mute, let's
Can
see
you?
if we can. Yes.
Oh, great. Oh man, that was a process trying to get that. I wish I could give everyone some advice on how I got it to unmute, but I really don't know what I did. Are you still there?
Yes, we are.
Okay, so yeah, I actually I've been working on this for a long time, so I had actually had a couple of questions, and I'm sorry if things are a little. I'm out at the Yawn House right now on a fire, so if I lose my signal, I'm in the woods. But so I got the my list right here. So one of the questions that I had, one of the biggest concerns for me and my neighbors is that we live on a public road and it's not county maintained. So it's a dirt road that's not county maintained, and the short-term rentals that operate on this road use it more than the residents do because they're driving in and out all the time, many cars, going to dinners, going to the beach, going, in and out all the time. And we have a dirt road. And so us as residents, we have to go out and maintain this road. The owners of the short-term rental are never around. And if they are, the road's the least of their concerns. And we have a hill on our road that's so steep that in the wintertime it washes out. And unless you have four-wheel drive, you cannot get up the hill. And so the people pulling up from wherever in Portland or wherever, skid their tires up and down the hill and rutted out so bad. And then us as residents are out there digging out potholes, paying money like to buy gravel and have it graded. And it just does not seem like you should be able to operate a for-profit commercial enterprise on a non-county maintained road. Did you catch all that?
I did. So does your neighborhood, do you have a neighborhood association out there or a homeowners association?
No.
Okay. One thing that we do with our newer subdivisions and partitions where they have these public roads is that the owners are required to have a road maintenance agreement that everybody has bought into, and it spells out who's responsible for the maintenance, how the costs are apportioned, and things like that. I know that you're looking at having to go back retroactively to probably an older subdivision and neighborhood to do something like that. But it would, I don't know if you've contacted the property owner about contributing to the cost of the road maintenance or looking at setting up some sort of maintenance agreement for your neighborhood.
Yeah, the property owner is very much disconnected from the community, and when they're around in town, it's kind of a joint ownership between a couple of brothers, and they have zero contact. And what little contact I've had has been like they've been very adamant that they can do whatever they want, and they have zero responsibility for the road. They just don't care. So and and that's the problem that I've had, just even on a county level, like really trying to figure out how can we get this, how start an HOA, how can we make this a private road, how can we, even if it was just like our road and we paid for it, we would love to pave the road and take care of it and put drainage systems in, but we're not going to do that if there's going to be somebody operating a private enterprise, in our neighborhood. That just doesn't make sense. We're not going to make something nicer so that someone else can take advantage. And it's nothing personal, it's just business.
Right.
So that's one thing, and I know that, and there's not much that anyone is really willing to do about any of this, so I'm really just trying to like kind of stack on the issues that we have as a community. So hopefully the broader view, and if there's anybody else out there that's having the same kind of issues, like hopefully we can start working through some of them as a county at least. And then so another major issue we have is the parking in the street. And we talked about, that was a big problem I had with the complaint process, right? Like if you have people stacked in a house and you're in the street, you can't even get to your house because you can't get around the cars, and it's 11 o'clock at night. Who do you call? And like we already have a staff of sheriffs that are already maxed out trying to take care of serious problems, and so I don't really want to call them and have them drop whatever they're doing to come out and deal with a parking situation. I know it's their job. I'm just trying to be a respectful, responsible citizen here. And so then I've called code compliance, I've left messages, I've called Vacasa, left messages, and it's just putting band-aids on a problem. A lot of this is just putting band-aids on problems that are systemic, really. And nowadays, like contemporary problem right now, COVID, like we have a nice little community, we have a quiet little community, everyone is careful, they're safe, they're protected, and then you bring people in from all over the country into these neighborhoods, and you just start dousing the neighborhood with all kinds of, whatever, COVID or anything else, and it's like, it's not really healthy for the community. And it kind of breaks up the sense of community too, just the people that live in a neighborhood. And I don't want to digress too much into the weeds, but it's already hard enough to have a community these days with technology and everything, but when you start putting vacation rentals and nobody talks to anybody anymore, and there's a lot of hostility. And finally, the last thing I've got is, and I kind of listened to your numbers because that was something that you were talking about, Clatsop Plains and the amount of complaints and where they were, And that's really interesting to me because I know for a fact my neighborhood has called in at least 5, maybe 10 or more complaints just at one house, just on one property. I know for a fact. And so that tells me right there that there's a problem with the flow of information. Either people aren't responding to the complaints that are being made, or they're not even being logged as complaints, and there's serious problems. I had a night, and I don't want to go into storytelling time, but this is important. I had a night that a short-term renter came to my door at 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock at night and pounded on my door drunk. And I came downstairs. I have a wife that's like full term pregnant. I have another baby asleep. I have a dog that's barking, and I have a guy pounding on my door. That I have no idea what he was doing. I have no idea if he wanted to talk to my wife or if he wanted to. I have no idea. He might have had mental issues. I have no idea. But I called that in. I called sheriffs. I called Rob Ledgerwood. I logged complaints. And if the numbers that you're telling me are true, those complaints did not get logged.
Okay.
And
Yeah,
thanks for
and
listening. I know it's hard. I know you got a lot going on.
no, you're welcome. And unfortunately, Rob is out sick today, so I can't ask him that question. I don't know if he grouped, say, all the noise complaints together and kind of just like one type of complaint, noise, and then, open permits. So unfortunately, I can't ask him that question right now, but I can follow up on that with Rob and get back to you on that. Robert Taylor. Okay, sorry, I'm making a note here. Okay. Carla, would you like to try again? I've got you unmuted as well. Okay. All right. So in the meantime, let's see. I had a written question from Richard Mario. Mr. Mario, I see that you're unmuted. Did you want to ask your question to the entire group?
Well, I can. Can you
Okay.
hear me?
Yes.
Well, I have two questions. One is just looking at the records. Are the records kept so that that you or we can find out if there's multiple complaints at the same house over a period of time? So so we can see if a house is a problem house. And then
Yeah.
and then my other question is, are you finding any false complaints?
So to answer the first question, when Rob gets a complaint, we have been logging all the complaints in, and I will follow up with Rob and verify that. But that is the process that we're supposed to be doing, is that if we get multiple complaints, so if you call and your neighbor calls and your neighbor down the street calls all on a Friday night because there's a big party at the short-term rental down the road from you, we would log that in as 3 separate complaints. And those are available by public records request. So it's not super secret information, but again, it's just things that we don't publicize on a regular basis just for security reasons. With regard to the second question about false complaints, I will not go out so far as to say that people have lied to us, but we have a lot of complaints, like I said, where it's very hard to verify um, that the complaint has happened. Because if you call at 11 p.m. about noise and you don't call the sheriffs, or you don't document it, or you don't take photos, or somehow document what's going on, say there's 20 cars parked up and down your street, and you call us on a Friday night, but you don't take a photo or anything like that, we have no way to document it. So it's basically a he said, she said type of situation. The other thing that we find sometimes is that not necessarily in Clatsop Plains, but we found in some of the other planning areas that people are very meticulous about how they interpret the ordinance. So, for example, if the ordinance says your trash should be in a securely fastened container, we have had complaints about people who have had their short-term rental trash removed, put into a container, but the container was too small, so they placed the extra bag of garbage immediately next to the container. And we have had people file code complaints about that as well. So not necessarily false, but in the overall scale of things, I would say that would be lower on our list of priorities. So
Sure.
I don't know if that fully answers your question, but
Well, that does. It just if I understand the answer, it's like we haven't able to verify where someone did intentionally false answer complaints is kind of where you
right,
are.
right.
If I can refine my first question, I hate to take so much time, but my first question was: is there a way to track where if a particular house over a 6-month period has had multiple complaints and what those complaints are, or do you just
Yes.
have all the records?
Yep. So once a record is entered, it's there. It doesn't go away. It doesn't get deleted. So it's always there in our system. So we can pull all the complaints that would go back. We switched software, but we have our old system yet. So we can pull complaints that probably go back to at least 2013, 2014,
Okay.
all the way through the present.
Oh, you haven't had short-term housing that long there, have you?
We've not had the official ordinance, but prior to that, they were still operating. They just paid their room tax and they weren't licensed or inspected.
Just one. May I do one more question?
Mhm.
Thank you. And maybe not just one more, but how do HOAs play into your code enforcement? Do they if they have their own rules? You don't enforce HOA rules, I would think.
No, we don't. So we go strictly, we allow a short-term rental in any legally constructed and permitted house.
Okay.
So, the HOA can have stricter regulations that they enforce, but we will not enforce them.
Okay. And then I have a comment, if I might. It sounds from your last caller and kind of my experience too is that the communication between the neighborhood and the short-term rental is a significant issue in trying to resolve something. And I think the idea of feeling like a community is another issue, where the short-term rental is not a member of the community, at least not like everybody else is. They have a different relationship with the community, and it sounds like some sort of communication effort between them is necessary. But if I understand, and I would think that would be the case, is that that's not your job, and I don't mean it in a negative way. It's not you're not set up in a way to help them improve their communication efforts and those kind of things.
Right. And some property owners just never will communicate. After we held our first short-term rental meeting in the Falcon Cove Beach area at the end of July, there actually was a very robust dialogue that happened after that between the short-term rental unit owners and the residents who are there full-time. And a lot of the short-term rental owners did actually make changes to the way they operate their businesses based on the feedback they got from their neighbors. It might be a little bit different there because I think some of those property owners do use their homes also for their own personal vacations and away time and second homes, but they also rent them out. I'm getting a sense that this might be a little bit different in your area in the Clatsop Plains, where maybe these are more truly investment properties. But that's just kind of my hunch. So, okay.
Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you. Okay, so next, Paula King had a question, and let's see here, Paula. So Paula, I've unmuted you if you wanted to ask your question. If not, I'll read it out.
Yes. On your map, it showed that the hugest cluster of short-term rentals are in the Sunset Beach area. And my question is, there ever any intent by the county to limit those properties from occurring? Because the fact of the matter is, I mean, we have most of the short-term rentals, and any house that goes up for sale anymore becomes a short-term rental. We have a lot of second homes that are also being used as vacation and rental homes as well. It has changed the atmosphere of our neighborhood quite a bit, especially during COVID. As Robert mentioned earlier, people from all over the state, including California and also California, were in our neighborhood, and it was palpable the number of people that don't live here that were here during the quarantine. And what's interesting is I counted, there's 8 of us in our neighborhood on this chat. And we have a very close community. It's like an old-fashioned neighborhood here. And so the bad players of short-term rentals are obvious. They treat their, I mean, it's a vacation for the folks that come in here, but we live here year round. And so when people come in for a weekend and think, oh, we're going to just party and have a good time because we're on vacation, and I get that because I go on vacation as well, but I don't know how we can control or reduce the impact of people's attitudes that come in. And the only way I can see to do that is to reduce the number of short-term rentals. I mean, I just think that at some point we have to say stop, close the gap, and allow the neighborhood to remain the neighborhood and not become nothing but a short-term rental vacation destination. Thank you. And thanks for doing this. I really appreciate it.
Oh, no, you're welcome. Thank you, Paula. So to go back to your initial question, which was, has the county considered limiting short-term rentals? I don't have the answer to that, but what this process is intended partly to do is to bring some recommendations to the Board of Commissioners in January, based on the input we're getting from these different meetings around the county. Definitely the concerns that we're hearing here in Clatsop Plains are the same concerns we're hearing in Arch Cape and in Falcon Cove Beach, about the loss of the community, how visitors come in and don't necessarily realize or understand that they are in a residential community, and they treat it more as a commercial area, and don't think and are insensitive to the fact that people live there year round. So we're going to bring a list of recommendations, not recommendations, but we're going to bring this input that we've received to the Board of Commissioners in January for them at a work session so that they can discuss it, because it's the board that will set the policy and direct staff about which direction we should be moving towards. So as that date gets scheduled, and it'll probably be towards the end of January after the new commissioners are sworn in, then we'll send a notice out when that work session will occur. And just so everyone's aware, typically at a work session, the board does not allow public input at that time. So it's really a chance for the board members to discuss among themselves the input that's already been collected by staff and the direction that they would like us to go. So, did that answer your question, Paula?
Yes, it did. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, next up we have Rob Andrews. Let's see here. I know he had asked a question. I don't see him still on the attendance list. Let's see here, unless he's, oh, there he is. Okay, Mr. Andrews, you are unmuted if you'd like to ask your question. Okay, well, let me read Mr. Andrews' question. He says, does the sheriff's office generate code violation complaints as well, or are county citizens responsible for all complaints? So sometimes, yes, the sheriff's office will forward something to us if they've received a noise complaint or a parking complaint. I think a lot of that will depend on the deputy who handles the call at a particular time. I know that we probably are not getting everything that's being phoned in or sent to the sheriff's office after hours. And that's a good question, and I'm going to make a note to see about following up to see if we can get a more formalized process so we are getting copies of everything. So thank you for that question. Okay, so next up in our list of questioners, Heather Fenton. Let's see here. Okay, Heather, I have you unmuted if you want to unmute on your end. Okay. All right, let me read Heather's question. It said, can you clarify what a short-term rental covered under this code is? It sounds like some people may be referring to regular vacation rentals. So a short-term rental is basically a dwelling unit or a house that's rented out for a period of less than 30 days. And that's how we define short-term rental. Anything longer than a 30-day rental period would be considered long-term, and that would be typically where you would have a tenant who would be there for a several-month period or a year period with a lease that has the option to be renewed. Okay. Mr. Taylor provided another comment. Short-term rentals are a zoning violation. You should not be allowed to operate a commercial enterprise in a residential zone, period. Mr. Mario also had another comment. Portland and larger cities have dealt with the community issues. We can learn lessons from them. Yes, and we do look to other communities. I know that locally Cannon Beach and Gerhardt and Seaside are all dealing with the same issues, Astoria as well. We do look outside the county though, and outside the state for examples. And I know that there's been a lot of discussion with Airbnb recently about a lot of these issues, and they have had much more serious issues, which thankfully we haven't had with actual criminal and activities and murders happening at their vacation rentals. So we do look for other examples of how to better refine our ordinance. Let's see, I had a note from our permit tech Clancy Adams, who said that yes, code enforcement does check the sheriff's logs each morning to see what complaints may have come in overnight. And then Holly Roos commented that she agrees with Paula King that the amount of short-term rentals needs to be capped. Okay. All right, so right now those are all the questions and comments I have. I'm looking to see if anybody wants to have any, make any further comments. If you could raise your hand or type me a question, and then I can go through that. We've got about 11 minutes left if we have anything else to cover right now. Okay. Oh, I have, let's see, Robert Taylor has his hand raised. I don't know, Mr. Taylor. Go
Can
ahead.
you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. Oh, I just wanted to, if anyone had any, wanted to say something, I kind of figured out how to unmute myself, and you would have to go to the chat window, and then you can click on your name, or you can to the microphone, or you can go, and then I think you have to go to, let's see. I just thought if somebody else wanted to speak, because there's a lot of people that I think had the same problem. Oh, so where was it? Audio. There was a thing that was switched on that said when you sign on, you're muted when you signed on, and you have to take that tab off. And I'm trying to find where that was, but settings, more, and then settings, and then there's a tab that says unmute upon joining, and if you switch that off, that's how I was able. And I don't know if Paula, you were able to do the same thing. And yeah, that's it. And ultimately, the complaint process needs to be streamlined. There's no way that, because I know for a fact how many complaints have been called in and those numbers don't match up. So if there is not a streamlined process, then the problem is not being fully recognized. And that's just bottom line. It's gonna tear neighborhoods apart. Absolutely, 100% gonna tear neighborhoods apart. So somebody needs to get on it. Needs to get the program streamlined, and that's all I got.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Taylor. Okay, let's see. Rory and Susan Calhoun had their hand raised, and I have you unmuted. Go ahead.
Okay, I just wanted to say that I personally don't want short-term rentals limited, because I feel that that's although I can see everyone's concerns about the problems that they're having, I don't want the county involved in management of my home. I do not have a short-term rental. I just don't want the county involved in my home. So I would like that to be logged for consideration too when you're talking with the commissioners.
Okay, thank you.
I also think that the short-term rentals in my community, in my specific 100-foot area, are not my concern, but there is a neighbor that has a horrible mess in his yard, and we're just not getting any help with that. So there's other concerns that are more concerning to me than the short-term rentals, but there are people in my neighborhood that have more problems than I do with those short-term rentals too. So that's all I wanted to say.
Okay, thank you. Okay, next up I have John All. And let's see, Mr. All, I have you unmuted if you want to unmute on your end. Or,
That me?
yep, that's you.
Yeah, again, same thing. I agree with the lady who just spoke. I don't see this as being an issue for further restrictions. I've lived here for a very long time, and the bulk of the problems that I see are arising from the trailer park and from long-term residents, not from short-term residents. I think this year has been absolutely an abnormality because of COVID. We have been inundated, but so has the rest of the coast. To allocate the problems that we've faced over this summer to short-term rentals is disingenuous. There has been just so many people coming and going up and down Sunset Beach Lane constantly, and it's not vacation rentals, it's just people. So many people coming, and there's been very little to restrict that access from other areas of the state and Washington too. So I urge the decision makers to take into account that we're living under very different times, and to restrict individual property rights on short-term rentals when the vast majority of people who come are causing no problems is unreasonable. I also do not have a vacation rental, but I think every one of my neighbors does use their properties as vacation rentals at some point, but they also use it themselves, and I have had zero problems from them. The RV park across over there, whole nother issue, and they're not investigated nearly as much as the individuals. They do not have to go through the permitting process. They do not have to have each one of their rooms or whatever trailers inspected constantly, nor do any of the hotels in the area. You are using a stronger and higher threshold for the individual property owners than you are for hotels and motels in the area, and that's unfair.
Okay, thank you, Mr. All. Okay, so let me go back to the written comments that have come in. I had one question that says, I am concerned that my neighbor is renting unpermitted. Is there a way to check on just one address for permitting? Yes, there is. And I've put up here on the screen contact information for Rob Ledgerwood. It's R Ledgerwood, R-L-E-D as in David, G-E-R-W-O-O-D at co.clatsop.or.us. You can send Rob an email. You can also call us at 503-325-8611, and we can verify whether or not a specific address does have a short-term rental permit. Okay, Mr. Mario has asked, are there any county committees that we could participate on? So yes, Planning Commission is one committee. They meet monthly at 10 a.m. on the second Tuesday of each month. And their next meeting will be November 10th at 10 a.m. And we are working on the GoToMeeting platform. If you go to the county's webpage on the right-hand side, you'll see the calendar button. And if you click on that, it'll bring up all of the different meetings for the different boards and committees throughout the county for the month that you're in. I would also encourage you to participate in the Clatsop Plains Citizen Advisory Committee meetings. The county is in the process of updating its comprehensive plan, and there is a committee that is established specifically for the Clatsop Plains area. They meet on the second Thursday of the month at 2 p.m. And their next meeting will be November 12th at 2 p.m. And again, if you go to the county's website, which is co.clatsop.or.us, I think. For some reason, I'm having confusion. But anyway, go to the county's website. The meetings are on the calendar, and I would encourage you definitely to become involved and participate in those meetings as well. We also have the videos from the old meetings, and the agendas are all posted online, so you can catch up on what's happening there as well. Let's see. And then let's see. And then if you look on the county's website, there was a follow-up question about becoming a member of a committee. And so on the county's website, there is a place under committees and boards where you can actually see committees that have vacancies on them. And you can submit an application online. And let me pull that up here real quick. So if you come to our webpage here, you go to councils and commissions, you'll see committee vacancies, and there are application forms online. We recently closed our comp plan citizen advisory committee. We had openings on the LC Jewell committee and on the Lewis and Clark committee, and that actually closed on October 16th. But you can get involved in all sorts of different things. We have an arts council, we have recreational lands. Definitely tune in to our planning commission meetings because there is a public comment period every month during those meetings as well. And let's see here, we've got just about a minute left. I do not see any other hands raised. So let me just quickly summarize what we'll be doing after this. So we will be posting the meeting video today, from today on the county's website. I will be sending a link to that to everyone who's participated in the meeting today, and you are certainly welcome and encouraged to send that out to whoever you think might be interested who couldn't make it today. We will also be letting everyone know when we have that work session scheduled in January with the Board of Commissioners. And then around that same time in January, late January, early February, we'll be scheduling our next quarterly meeting with your planning area for the Clatsop Plains. In the meantime, please feel free if you have questions or additional comments that you want to submit, contact Rob Ledgerwood and I had his email up there. You can also contact me at comdev, COMDEV, at co.clatsop.or.us. And having said all that, I want to thank everybody for taking an hour out of their Friday morning. I really appreciate it. And I look forward to hearing from you all again in the next few months. And that's everything. So thank you very much and have a good day. Bye.